Craig Brain is not your brain or my brain. Love it or hate it or something in between. Welcome to the squishy, alien middle inside of this dude's skull. Take a peek. Take a peek.
Welcome back to Craig Brain. Hope you've been enjoying these. If you're still listening or watching, maybe that's the case. This is a fun episode. It was a fun... Well, actually, fun is just the wrong word completely. I guess for me, it's fun because I like deeper work. I like deeper conversation. There's a book called Deep Work. I know about 1,000 people that need to read that book. Turn off their text messaging alerts and email notifications and fantasy updates. And do some deep work. But so yeah, this whole project, actually I've recorded 2 episodes of this for this podcast, because the first one, I didn't know how this blog would turn out because there was so much content around this. But this started one night for me at probably 11 o'clock at night. Most of my family likes to go to bed early except for Nolan. But Jeanette could love, like this morning, she got up at 6 a.m. and she's like poking at me and like, hey, no, you want to talk now? You want to have deep conversations now at 6 a.m.? I'm ready. You want to go to coffee? And I was like, oh my gosh, like get away from me, Satan. And it's just like, it's awful. But so when nobody's sleeping, or when everyone's sleeping, say at 11 o'clock at night, I don't have a TV in my room, and so oftentimes I'll put on headphones. I'll have my iPad or my iPhone, and I'll just whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's just kind of having some deeper thoughts. It's been the best time for me, I think, ever, from just a reflection time, from a business side, from a ministry side, to just wild sense of notes, to most of the stuff that you're seeing and hearing on Craig Brain has probably started there in some capacity. And so for me, I started with a book called How We Love, and it was Kay Millan, who I'd read this book. Jenna and I had done some introspective work on trying to figure out why we are the way we are. And I found out I was a vacillator and she was a avoider. And then they have this MP3 that they sell for like $1. I've since talked to them and tried to tell them they could charge a lot more than $1 for this MP3 that felt like these 2 people have been living with us or just listening to every fight or conversation we've had as an avoider and a vacillator. And we ended up spending 3 days with them. I'm a guy that doesn't want to go see a counselor, doesn't want to see a therapist ever. Like I hate a lot of the type of work they do. It feels to me very chiropractic. Just get in every week and see me. And, ding, ding, ding when your hour's up and next person in. I like coaches a lot more than counselors. I am a coach. And so that's why I would never be a referee. I'd be the coach. And so to me, a therapist and counselors, you got to find a good one, because sometimes you can just manipulate the hell out of them, and then they just don't like to talk anyways and give their advice. And then there's a business going on in their brain that's like, I need you back in my office. Now, I have a very good friend who's a counselor that doesn't need the money, and he doesn't do it for the money. And so I know there's people like that out there. But so for me, I was having dinner with Kay Millan, and I was talking about what's the best thing you guys do? Because I was just interested in their ministry. And they said, the best thing we do about 6 times a year. And that's a whole nother story for another day, when I think a lot of us, the best thing we do it very little. You wonder why you're miserable. You wonder why you're unhappy in your job. We have a whole podcast coming about that a little bit later. But 6 times a year, what do? We spend 3 days with couples. And it was like, and here's me, if you know me, I'll ask you a lot of questions. How much you charge? Where do you do it? Do you do it together? Does anyone else do it? Have you duplicated yourselves? Have you trained somebody else to do it? What are the types of people that, do you go to them? Do they come to you? Like, what's the schedule? What's the cost? And they're like, $5,000. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you guys need to charge more for that and you need to do it more if it's the best thing you do. And she says to me, Kay says, you'd be really great for the assessment. Or the intensive, not the assessment. Like, you guys would be great. Best words my wife's ever heard. Like, oh, like, what? Yes, I've been asking this guy. And I was like, oh, I wasn't asking you for me. I was like super intrigued with this business model and like what you're doing. She goes, oh, I know. But like, you guys would be really great for it. And I was like, it's the best thing you guys do? Yeah, it's the best thing we do. Oh, cool. Awesome. Like, you tell me good information's in front of me and I'm not at your house in a crisis. I'm not paying you to be there, and you say, hey, I have good information. The best thing that I do, we can only do it 6 times. I'm like, when can you get me in? And so we spent 3 days with them, and a lot of the work that we started, we've continued to do in these, in the series, probably the year since we got How We Love. It was actually a year, Valentine's Day. We were reading that book on Valentine's Day date in November. No, that's not November. It would be February of 2018. And so this has been, about a 15-month discovery and journey. And so all that to say is, like, one of those nights I was processing a lot of that in bed, and I was like, the things we do are deeply connected to just the people we are and what we've seen and what we've been raised with and the hurt that's been done to us. We might just be repeating a lot of that. And so I just had these random thoughts, and I was like, man, what's the root? And we deal a lot with people caught in sexual sin, but I don't care what you're dealing with. And it was just like, there's something bigger. And I thought of the word resentment. And then I was like, man, all these thoughts just kind of poured out. And I think the title for this episode now is, my Sunday best and the hurt beneath it. And I said, there's a lot of hurt to heal under our Sunday best. And I think for me, being in these religious spaces and churches and being a Christian, I think we cover this stuff up so much more than the rest of the world because we have an image to keep. We've got a church to attend, an elder board to lead. And so I'm sitting there. I said that line while I ended up on a stage with this message. And I was looking out at the crowd, and I just said, like, what's underneath your Sunday's best? And we went on to expand on that whole discovery. And for me, like, I didn't ever think I was writing that talk or message for me. What do I resent? What's my root? What's my pain? And I was like, oh, this will really help people in doing the work that we want people to do and the other resources that we have. But when we got through this, I ended up realizing, like, this whole thing was so much more about, like, this journey that I'm on. And it's just the self-discovery of who you are. It's why I'm fascinated with all these personality tests. The Kolbe, the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram. I just did this. What was it? How to Fascinate one. And to me, it's just it's filling out a quick kind of test and reading back. Just wow, a lot of knowledge and understanding about. Oh, well, that's why I'm like this. And I think then the work is figuring out, like, who you're living with or who raised you and trying to understand what they are like. And it's been a fascinating discovery of how oftentimes, like, maybe you're just misunderstood. Or maybe for me, I've learned a lot through this about feelings and emotions. And I had a situation just last week come up. I have a spa membership. We know that if you listen to episode 1. I'm recruiting spa fans across the world, hopefully. I'm not talking about Korean spas either, and that's not being racist at all. But I did get introduced to Korean spa the other day, and I was like, why? No, guys. And so my friends that are Korean, I actually called one of them and said, I don't understand this. Please explain. And I was like, have you been to a spot like a hotel, like where not everyone's roaming around naked and everyone's like, nobody's scrubbing your back? And he's like, oh, yeah, those are American spas. So I was at an American spa, and sometimes you don't have cell phone coverage because you should be on your phone there. So I was in between. I was with a friend, and we're spending some time together talking. And I needed to actually get a hold of my wife and say, hey, I'll be home by dinner at 6:30. And so she doesn't answer her phone because it's in her purse. If you're a male, in a relationship with a female, that's what you've heard every time you've probably tried dialing. Oh, it's on silent in my purse. And so my son, I know I can get a hold of him. And I called him. I said, hey, I need to get a hold of mom. He's like, oh, she's just in the kitchen. Okay, get her the phone. And he's like, okay. And then it went dead. And I was like, all right. So I called Nolan back because it's like, he'll answer. Like, and it goes right to voicemail. And then I called Elise, my daughter, and it's like, I don't know, like her phone's probably like nowhere either, but it went right to voicemail. Then I called Jeanette and it went right to voicemail. And then I got on Voxer, and then I got on text. And now I'm like a madman because I'm like, okay, we live in this place. My wife has just complained about the security because the door to the front of the street is wide open, and they haven't done anything about that. And now I'm away, and it's only 6:30 at night, but it's like, you, as a dad, you have all these kind of thoughts. And then I'm like on Voxer, and I'm like, hey, guys, like, what's wrong? It's like dinner. Like, is everyone now okay? And like, it went on for like 10 minutes. And I was like, I just want to get back in the spa. Like, I just cut out. Now it's like, that just killed my vibe, the spa vibes. But Nolan finally, after like 10 minutes, he finally picks up his phone. And his first thing out of his mouth was like, Dad, you have to be so like mad about it. And I was like, oh, like, that's just me being scared. And it's like, you don't understand that yet. But it was like, yeah, I come off angry and I come off mad, but like, dude, I'm frantic going like worst case scenario of like what just happened. Cause this is really weird. And then it's like, yeah, the phone coverage and internet went completely down and nobody was getting a hold of, but like I was talking to you 1 second and then it was gone. And then just me explaining that to Nolan, it's like, oh, well, and then me realizing sometimes like anger, what I've found is like the easiest of the emotions. Because there's other stuff to tap into is much harder. So for me, if you go back to my family, that was my dad. My mom, like, not so, but my dad. So it's like, oh, that's all I knew. And now as I'm finding out about my dad's family, it's like, oh, that's all he knew. So a lot of this work is like, oh, that's why I'm like that. But hey, here's where I want to get to. And I think one of the things I'm learning through this is just like, hey, let's talk about why we just did that and why we don't like that. And then what we're trying to convey. Because when you tell your kids and wife, like, hey, I was just scared. Like I yelled at an Uber guy the other day. Like I got out of his car because he ran a red light and 2 cars almost hit. And I was like, that was me being scared, not being necessarily angry because I was just shaking. Like we almost just got drilled. So all this work, I think is fascinating. And just for the plug here, resentment.org is where the final piece of this project that we shipped, a few months ago ended. And I would say for me, it's not ended, it's just kind of started. And there's probably a bunch of other projects that we'll put together because of this, the things that I'm learning, the things that I'm finding. And I think the Resentment Project, it's totally free. You're going to hear from 8 of my friends that I called up and said, could you share stuff about pain, about your upbringing, about stuff that you've started to figure out late in life and started to try and, understand yourself and others a bit more. And so you're going to find their video series. You're going to find a sermon that I did at this church and a PDF that Levi, who's written all this stuff alongside of me on Craig Brain, has worked hard on. And so it's all free. Just it's a really cool site. So cool project. Like I said, nothing to buy there, but yeah, check it out at resentment.org. So thanks for listening. Thanks for all that. And we'll be back next week.
Thanks for thinking through Craig Brain. This podcast is only a small summarized part of a larger conversation. To read the full story, check out www.craigbrain.com, join the Craig Brain group on Facebook, and follow at Craig Gross on whatever social suits your fancy.